Hello. In this video, I will provide an introduction to health loss measurement, burden of disease, and the concept and methodology of disability-adjusted life years, aka DALY. We have many measures of diseases, such as measures of morbidity like prevalence and incidence, measures of mortality like cause-specific mortality rate for a certain condition, quality of life, and DALY. DALY is essentially the number of years lost to premature death and years lived with a disability with a certain severity and duration. DALY combines information on deaths and cases of disease or injury. Non-lethal effects and lethal effects of diseases are combined by DALY. DALY has two components: years life lost and years lived with disability. One DALY means 1 year lost of the healthy life. DALY is a health gap measure which can be seen in its components. DALY can be calculated as all-cause DALY, which includes the DALYs of all causes combined, or cause-specific DALY. Regardless, as seen in the formula, DALY is the sum of YLL and YLDs. DALY measures a population health status against an ideal in which everyone lives into old age free of disease. To understand this, we need to dive deeper into the calculation of the components of DALY. YLL is the component that reflects mortality and is years lost due to premature death. To calculate it, we need mortality data, cause of death for each of the mortalities, and age at death based on sex and year. As seen in the formula, YLL for a cause is the multiplication of the number of deaths due to that cause by the standard loss function. The loss function is the specification of years of life lost for a death at age A for sex S. YLD reflects the disability. For its calculation, we need either incident or prevalent cases, average duration, and the disability rate. Since the Global Burden of Disease Study 2010, this organization has calculated YLDs as the prevalence of each sequelae multiplied by the relevant disability weight. A few notes. For YLL, we use a standard life table which represents the potential maximum lifespan of an individual in good health at a given age, and which is based on the lowest observed death rates for each age group in countries with more than 5 million population. GPT uses the same reference table for males and females. The disability weight is between 0 and 1, where 1 is equal to death and 0 is perfect health. DALY can be calculated purely on incidence or prevalence. However, a hybrid approach has also been proposed, in which YLD is estimated by the prevalent-based approach, while YLL is estimated by incidence approach. Each of these methods have advantages and disadvantages. Pure prevalence approach is probably more suited for studies focusing on the burden of disease in a specific year, and can be used to roughly estimate the burden of non-fatal diseases. However, it is not frequently used for burden of disease determination. On the other hand, incidence-based approach is more beneficial in decision-making, and YLL and YLD are calculated consistently. The disadvantage of this method is seen when trying to estimate the burden of a disease with a gradual fall in incidence, but with a persistent high prevalence. This method is vulnerable to time-related problems, and we also need to consider comorbidities. Hybrid approach is less influenced by discounting And we don't need disease duration since we're using prevalence for the VLD calculation. However, it may confuse those new to the topic. Another disadvantage is the burden of diseases with a short duration. Also, some caution is needed to avoid underestimation of the burden of the infectious diseases. DALY estimates in different studies can be different based on their methodology, and therefore caution is needed when comparing these studies. We also have data problems like heterogeneous case definitions or instruments. In GPD, they use statistical approaches such as crosswalking for the heterogeneous case definitions. Also, no available data may be at reach for number of deaths or causes of those deaths, etc. One way of addressing this is using uncertainty intervals, which provide a measure of strength of each quantity and is a range of values that the correct estimate is likely to be there. Large uncertainty intervals indicate limited data, small studies, and conflicting data, while narrower uncertainty intervals mean that more extensive data is present, or data is of higher quality, or data is consistent across different sources. In global burden of disease study, uncertainty interval for an estimate is calculated by calculating the estimate 1000 times, sampling from the distributions, and ordering the estimates from the smallest to the largest value, and then 95% uncertainty interval is determined by the 25th and 975th value. The references and further reading is provided in this slide. Thank you for your attention. Don't forget to like and subscribe as it helps with the channel growth and increases its visibility.